Welcome, everybody. We're officially live for the Not Your Average Investor Show. Today, we're talking about how to save on maintenance and construction expenses with one of maybe the biggest expert in North America of single-family workforce housing rental properties from a construction standpoint. I am your host, Pablo Gonzalez, and GC is not with us today because he's business planning with his partners as he tends to do at this time of the year. But we do have our phenomenal community manager, who we call MTM, because she brings us the moments that matter, and because her name is Madison the Magnificent. Say hello, Madison.
Hi, everybody.
And the guest of honor today, he is in charge of all in-house construction stuff at JWB, essentially. Like we said, manages one of the biggest. I mean, there isn't a lot of outfits that are this big in this space, operating at this scale. He is the pride of the University of Alabama, we've heard. What else? There was something else interesting. Oh, the man that built the studio.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Guy, the reason why we have this wonderful background and amazing acoustics over here, William Burgstiner, the fourth. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Appreciate that. I will say I was not involved in the building of the studio, but if I did have to add one thing, I would say like maybe this wall over here, maybe like a Greg Cohen Hollywood Walk of Fame. So if I do good enough, I expect to be the first star on the Greg Cohen Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Like each tile.
Each tile.
Yeah.
Right. There you go. If we get nothing else out of today.
They're in business planning, which means that, we're reviewing my scope. If I don't get that as part of my scope, that we're going to do this for next year, I'm walking.
I'm just saying.
All right. So that being said, want to welcome everybody that's dialing in. William, you're in mid-season form. You already get it with the inside jokes and just like the conversational humor here. Love it. For those of you that are joining us on YouTube, for those of us that are joining us live, are you a podcast guy? You listen to podcasts?
Not traditionally, no. I do a lot of driving. You would think that I listen to podcasts.
You would. A learned man like yourself.
Yeah. Sometimes I like to drive in silence. I've got a 2-year-old at home, so silence is golden.
That's true. Right? Well, the good news is our podcast is blown up. I looked at the report last week. There was, I think it was like 700 downloads of the podcast last week.
That's awesome.
So doing really, really well. If you're out there and you are watching on YouTube or you're joining us live, we would love it if you check out the podcast while you're driving around. Maybe, just a little bit of extra company of hanging out with me and GC and the rest of the Not Your Average Investor community. I listen while I'm cooking. I listen while I'm walking the dog. I listen while I'm driving. I'd say I listen when I'm working out, but I don't think I can fool anybody.
This man can multitask.
I'll tell you what. It's the beauty of audio, man. Yeah. So that being said, check out the podcast, Not Your Average Investor Show. If you haven't done it, we'd love it if you kind of left a little 5-star rating and maybe a review about what you like about it. That would really, really help us out, community. And I know you like to be helpful. And speaking of our community, William, you were not aware of this tradition, but I told you how we kick off every show, right?
Did.
It's the roll call, baby. We got the MVP, Lee Bishop, kicking us off. We got Madison in the chat already. We got Lita Song, a beautiful investor from Minnesota. Good to have you. We got our leadoff hitter batting third today, John Henning. We got the early bird of Columbus, Ohio, Dean Curry. We got the ringmaster of the Not Your Average Investor community, Drew Barnhill in the house. Who else? We got the maven from the mountains of Denver, Leslie Wilson. With us
sound too
today.
shabby.
Not too shabby. We got everyone's favorite fiduciary, fee-based financial advisor, friend, Kelly Barenbaum in the house. Good to have Kelly in here. We got Chris Lee from Fernandina Beach. Good to have you back. Chris, we got our regulars, the Riley family, Gary and Rosalind from Marietta, California. We regard them when they show up because we like the R. It's the alliteration of the R's. I don't know if you figured that out there. But so we got the mountain man, Billy Green from the snowy mountains of Colorado. Billy, we're getting snow already. All right. Maybe ski season starts a little early, man. I hope you're getting some of that. Good to have you back in the house. We got that man that everybody knows from California, Noah Randari. Noah, good to have you back in the house. I just bought a ticket to California for early December. Maybe we can get together down there. I don't know if you're in the South or the North. Going to the South, we got the mama bear of the marketing team, Cody Adams. Who else? We got Pamela Myers from the Seattle area. Pamela, good to have you in the house. Denny Davis with a woo pig suey. I know you love pig suey, don't you? SEC West. Who else we got in here? Oh, we got Big Papa in the house. We love it when he calls in. You know who Big Papa is? Jay Cohen, Greg's dad. John Moran from Port St. Lucie. John, I feel like I've seen your name on the show before. Good to have you in here. I love Port St. Lucie. We got the first family of the Not Your Average Investor Show community, Ken and Carolyn Moline, the matriarch and patriarch. We salute you. Who else we got? Layla Powell in the house. Oh, I said hi to Layla already. Teammate Layla. Yes, Big Papa, that's a mustache. We got the patron Santorios of the Not Your Average Investor Show community. Michael Santoros from Northern Virginia. We got Bill Shields with his Buenas tardes, amigos. Bienvenido, Bill Shields. Haven't seen you in a while with your trademark Duolingo action. Pedro Nacenceno from Jersey checking in. Pedro, good to have you. Rena Lopez from California. Good to have you. Rena, I think that's a new name, Rena. Good to have you. Hope you make a tradition out of this. Glenn Schenken from Massachusetts. Glenn, that's definitely a new name. I don't recognize you. Welcome. I hope you make this a tradition. Hang out with us. Who else? Stephen Borello.
Oh, that's my father-in-law.
Yeah,
What up,
Dad?
Peepaw?
I love it. I love it, man. Growing the audience. Geepaw. Yeah, he checked in with that. Who else? Donna Chica from California. Donna, good to have you back. All right. That was a good one. Oh, Rena has been here before. Sorry, Rena. I apologize. Glad to have you back. Speaking of energy, man, 5,700 properties. How many properties does JWB have these days?
Yeah.
What's the number that you tell
Yeah.
yourself?
Probably, I was gonna say 5,500, but 57, give or take. Yeah,
I like-
we're right around there. Yeah,
Yeah, you don't listen to every show, but I'm known to exaggerate. So
there you go.
50,
The dramatic effect, of course.
it's,
Right?
it's what I'm a hype man.
Yeah.
It's what I do.
Exactly.
That being said, and like not only do you have this like large scope of properties that you oversee the interior construction from, you have a really unique perspective based on your path here. Why don't you tell the Not Your Average Investor family kind of like how you got to this position
Yeah.
and why we think you're so smart?
Well, I don't know about that, but yeah, I mean, I've been with JW for about 6 years now, and I definitely took a little bit of a different path within the company. When I got brought on in 2017, I was brought on as part of our acquisitions team. So I was underwriting properties, both homes to purchase and renovate and sell to investors, as well as vacant land. Look at it, say, hey, we can build this floor plan based on the size of the lot. We can rent it for this. We can build it for this. Here's what the expected returns would be. So that was kind of my introduction to JWB, if you will, and my introduction to the construction side of the business as well, because pretty much anything that I was putting under contract and purchasing, that was kind of on me to make a good decision. It was either a good buy or a bad buy, right? I'm setting everybody else in the pipeline up for success.
Interesting.
Renovations, new construction, everybody involved there. So just kind of as the needs of the business grew and shifted with the market, there was really a need on the construction side of the business. So now, in addition to being in the acquisition side, I've been a superintendent on the new construction side, worked with our builder partner, American Classic. I've been a superintendent on the renovation side, handling renovations, property turns, construction services tickets, which we'll talk about today. And again, as needs of the business continue to grow, I was a supervisor on the construction side, and now I'm kind of overseeing everything from an in-house standpoint: turnkey renovations, client renovations, property turns, construction services, anything that falls under the JWB umbrella construction wise. I've got my hand in the cookie jar.
It's a lot, man. I'm sure you see a lot of variability in the things that you see. I would assume.
doubt.
No 2 days are the same kind of thing.
No doubt about it.
Makes it fun.
Yeah.
So that, I want to, this to me is a good moment to just talk about this idea of, I have like a total business crush on JWB, right? Like I feel like working with y'all has really shaped how I think as an entrepreneur and what I think of businesses and how things work. And one of the things that I've been noticing the most lately is this idea of specialists, right? Like you guys, especially in the turnkey property, real estate investing world, you have more specialist titles that are driving specific metrics than the rest of the ecosystem out there, right? From somebody that just manages like when we did the property turn show, like just managing the scope of the property turn to those kinds of things. Just like I'd never heard of a title that has to do with in-house construction for a property management company for a vertically integrated turnkey rental property. And it makes sense that it's something that just evolved from the needs of the clientele. And I think what's really interesting, right? We have 3 kinds of people that listen to the show. One is the JWB client, like myself and a lot of people in the community, which we're super pumped to, have your skill set already employed working for us. There is the person that is in this asset class and already has another property manager. And then there's the person that's doing it for themselves. And I think what's really valuable to the audience is to just kind of like dive in from the different perspectives of, if I was someone doing myself or I was handling property management, what the real big issues are that you mitigate by having the mindset of an interior construction guy. And you kind of gave me 4 or 5 different inflection points of what you kind of like what takes up your time on that side, right?
Yeah.
And it's the idea of when do you go from something being able to be handled from behind a desk to I need some eyes in the field. The idea of deciding between competing bids once you do something like that, when a problem gets like out of hands and you just need an adult in the room to make a decision, and what is that like line of demarcation between maintenance and renovation time?
Yeah.
So I'd love to just go one by one on that. So talk to me about this idea of something that can't be managed from a desk. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying we've got a phenomenal in-house maintenance team. I mean, they're fielding calls on a daily basis, opening work orders, getting the proper vendors in the proper place. But there comes a time and a place where, depending on what's going on, again, you can't manage it from behind a desk, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's something that needs active project management. And really the way that I like to define that is when we get into the realm of talking about, am I going to have multiple vendors involved? That's where really that active project management comes into play. If it's something that's large enough that we're going to have to displace a resident for a period of time, right? The longer that resident's out of the house, it's a poor experience for them. It's a poor experience for the owner. We want to get in there. We want to get our hands on it. We want to manage that project and get it resolved as quickly as possible. So again, something that's going to need active project management. A really good example of that would be, for instance, if I've got an older home that's got maybe cast iron drains and I need to go in and redrain the house and I'm going to have to jackhammer concrete up, right? That's not something you can manage from behind a desk. Not only are you having plumbing involved, you've got drywall involved, tile involved, flooring involved, cleaning. So again, you've got a lot of different factors. And if you're not staying on top of that, managing the vendors, being at the project, being on site every single day, managing that can get derailed pretty quickly.
It makes a lot of sense. So if I'm managing my own property or I'm working with a different property manager somewhere else in the United States, I'm looking for these moments of kind of like what you just said. If there are multiple scopes involved, if there's more than one vendor, you're going to need somebody that isn't just giving calls. You're going to need somebody on site, putting in some looks, actively property managing. If the homeowner, the resident needs to leave the home, you definitely want somebody actively pushing to get them back in the home because of the disturbance. Give me an example of something that like maybe somebody might think to call you, but you're like, no, you can manage this from behind the desk. But like, what are those kinds of things?
Well, a good example of one that could start that way and then evolve into something that the construction business has to get involved in is, let's say a resident calls in and goes, hey, I've got a clogged drain. My sink's not draining. Okay. The initial thought process is, hey, our maintenance team's going to open up a work order. They're going to send the plumbers out there. The plumbers are going to snake the drain. Let's say we go out there and we get it working. And then a week later, they call back in, they go, I'm clogged again, So what do? Well, we may send the plumber back out. Generally speaking, what we're going to likely do is we're going to get the construction team involved and we're going to say, hey, that was kind of a quick turnaround here. We may need to really get another set of eyes on this. And we may send somebody out from the construction team to snake the drains along with cameraing the drains to see, is there a larger underlying issue here? So something that could start as, hey, I think this is a pretty straightforward cut and dry type of deal that depending on the situation could turn into a much larger issue.
That's a great illustration. So it sounds like it might be a single scope. I'm going to just call a plumber. I'm just going to call an HVAC tech. They fix it and the situation arises again very quickly. Now you're saying, oh, I don't just need somebody to go out there and try to give it a short fix. I need somebody to go out there and give an evaluation.
Right.
Seems kind of like another line of demarcation.
Exactly.
So it's multiple. If you may know from the beginning that there's multiple people involved, you may know from the beginning that the resident needs to leave, but what evolves to it is like, okay, when you need somebody to actually make their own opinion, give an evaluation, that's when, if I was a property manager myself, or if I was a customer of a property manager, I'd be pushing them to say, okay, can we get an actual construction person out there to take a look at this?
Yeah, and that's a two-sided thing as well. It's a benefit to the owner that we're going to get out there and get our eyes on it and ensure that there isn't some type of larger issue, because the worst thing that we could do is just continuously open work orders, continuously spend money without fixing the issue at hand, the root of the issue. We're extremely cognizant of the fact that every dollar that we spend is negatively affecting the returns of the property. But just as important as the other side of that is for the resident and the resident experience.
True.
You know, we focus a lot on the resident experience, and that's one of the most important facets of our business, because we know that if we keep our residents happy, they're going to be a lot more likely to, you know, renew that lease and stay in that property for the long term. So just as important as the owners, we want to make sure the residents are taken care of as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Talk to me, just to veer off here a second. When you were doing acquisitions, right? You were kind of like setting it up for success on the front end. Now you're ensuring the success on the back end with construction services. When did the resident become such a focus to you? Like, how did you put that part together?
I think it's always been the focus, right? Again, it's part of what makes JWB unique. You look at our average duration of lease being at what, about 4.5 years, right? That doesn't happen by accident, right? That doesn't happen just because we encourage 2 or 3 year leases. That happens because we treat our residents as family, just as we treat our owners as family. So
Yeah.
I think that the residents always been just as important of a factor as anything.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's important to point out, right? Like the title of the show is how to save money on maintenance and construction expenses. You know, we're talking about that right now as far as like getting somebody involved at the right time. But what's really important when you are a rental property investor is keeping your property occupied. So giving that resident the best experience. We talk a lot on the property management side as far as long-term leases, high renewal rates, but high renewal rates only come if you give them a good experience. Yep. So there is always the decision of, am I going to spend some money on this thing? And how is it going to affect my return? Mm-hmm. It's important to think of how spending that money is going to affect your return in the sense of like resident experience and keeping it occupied.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because if that resident's happy, they're going to stay, they're going to renew that lease, and that property is going to continue to cash flow. And then you're ultimately going to avoid all of the expenses that come along with vacancy, you know, tenant placement fees, property turn costs, you know, the home sitting on the market, not cash flowing. So the most important thing that we could do is create a great resident experience to keep them in there. And that, you know, what does that do in the long run? I mean, that just gives us more opportunity to capitalize on the, you know, you guys talk about the profit centers of investing in real estate. Yep. That just prolongs that over the lifetime of the investment.
Yep. I love it. All right, cool. So number 2 that we talked about, deciding between competing bids, right? So this is kind of like what you said. It goes from maintenance to construction services when there's multiple scopes in hand, but anytime there is a scope in hand, you're likely to going to get multiple bids. Tell me a little bit about how you approach that.
I think there's 2 ways you could look at that, right? There's two scenarios that I would think would fall into that bucket. The first would be, let's say I've got what appears to be a leak coming out of the ceiling. Okay. And I've got, you know, the roofing guys saying, oh, this is a leak coming from the HVAC system. And I've got the AC guys saying this is a roof leak, right? I've got 2 differing opinions here. I've got 2 different maybe proposed scopes of work here. And it's up to us, you know, being the construction experts, to go in and say, hey, this is actually what's going on here. The worst thing that we could do is not investigate it and say, oh yeah, it's a roofing issue. That's not a roofing issue. Again, every dollar that we spend that's not going towards fixing the problem, it's negatively affecting the ROI of the property. So the other scenario I would say falls into that.
So just to clarify, you didn't even get into like who's more expensive. You just got into like, what is the actual right path of action?
What's the issue at hand? Like, I'm not going to go in there and spend money unnecessarily if I don't even know what's going on.
There you go. Okay. Right. So I just wanted to clarify. Yeah. That's the first decision.
Yeah. I think the second item that would fall in that bucket is probably where you were going is, you know, I'll go back to the example that we used earlier when we talk about, hey, I've got old cast iron drains. Okay. Maybe we got to redrain the house. Okay. Well, you know, we call somebody out there and they give us a recommendation, say, oh, we got to redrain all of this. We got to replace the sewer lines, whatever it may be. It's going to cost you X amount of dollars. Right. Well, you know, maybe we're going to go in there and we're going to call a different plumber and we're going to get a second opinion. And maybe that plumber comes back and says, hey, look, you know, the issue is really contained to right here. Maybe we don't need to redrain this entire house right now. Maybe we just need to redrain this bathroom. Right. So again, what is that doing? We're spending less money. It's great for the owner. We're getting the issue fixed, which is great for the resident. And that's likely something to where we can get in there and hopefully not have to displace a resident and get it done quickly, and everybody's moving on with life. So it's not necessarily saying, hey, I don't, you know, what what does or doesn't need to be done between two different trades.
Mhm.
I know what the issue is here, but do I have a cheaper option?
Yeah.
That's still going to fix the underlying issue.
So what I'm hearing from you essentially is that when it comes to deciding on the project itself, there's kind of two I keep saying inflection points. There's two decisions to be made.
Yeah.
One is, what is the problem that we need to solve? And then the other is, how do we want to solve this problem?
Right.
In your experience, how do you, like, let's say I'm a property manager myself, or I'm working with a property management company that doesn't have in-house. What am I looking for in someone that can make that call for me? Like, is it a type of equipment? Is it an experience factor? What do you think works for you in being able to make that call?
I think it comes down to the relationships that we've created with our vendors.
Okay.
You know, if I have and when I say a relationship, I'm not talking about you're going to do what I tell you to do for the price I tell you to do it when I tell you to do it. I'm talking about a true relationship where they're looking out for us, we're looking out for them. If I have that trusted relationship with that vendor, that's really a lot of what I'm relying on. I'm not a plumber by trade. I'm not an expert plumber, but we have trusted plumbers that we've built relationships with over a long period of time. And I know that I can rely on them, and I know that I can rely on what they say. And that's, you know, the proof's in the pudding.
Yeah. So if I'm looking for someone to make this decision for me, I'm not so much asking, what is your typical cost that you get out of this? I'm asking, what are your relationships like with your subcontractors? Do you have longstanding relationships?
Exactly.
Are you just going out to market and getting 5-10 bids and then telling me what you think? Or are you going to like your one person that you've known for 20 years that you know can treat you right?
I think a little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I like that, man. That's cool. Anything else on that one as far as competing bids? Is there anything to talk about as far as like price control when it comes to competing bids and picking out like a price point or anything like that?
Well, when you talk about price, I think that one thing that's important to say, again, and we keep going back to this, and I think you guys have like mashed up a bunch of what I talked about when we did the employee appreciation show, is that, again, we're really cognizant of the fact that every dollar that we spend is going to affect the returns of the property.
Yeah.
But I think that something that's also really important to understand is the cheapest option is not necessarily always the best option, right? You can go in there and you could Band-Aid something 15 times, but it's not going to fix the problem. Right. So the cheapest option isn't always the best option. And that's another area of this where we can provide value in counseling our clients and our owners to say, hey, look, you've got option A and option B. If you really want to fix this option, maybe option B is maybe the better route for you to go. And here's why.
Yeah, that makes sense. Again, going back to the prism of, you're not just looking at initial cost, you're looking at resident experience at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Because the thing that really drives your returns to match what the acquisition person set you up to succeed is occupancy.
Yep.
Right.
No.
Cool. I like that. So I think this is a good time to remind people that if you want JWB to be your property manager, you go to chatwithjwb.com, set up a call. You can, if you invest with JWB, obviously it happens because it's a vertically integrated service. But if you are in the Jacksonville area, Northeast Florida, chances are they can manage your property. So go to chatwithjwb.com if you want all this stuff as part of your package. So anyways, let's get into number 3. Problem gets out of hand and needs a final call. I refer to that as the adult in the room, which I need often for myself. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think that goes back to something that we talked about a little bit earlier where, maybe we open a work order, we call somebody out, we think we've got the problem fixed, and it ends up being a reoccurring issue. Right. And I think that that's when we really have to get in there and kind of get to the root of what the true issue is, and not just keep trying to go for that temporary fix, putting the Band-Aid on it. So that's kind of what I think about is this something that keeps coming back around?
So issue resurfaces sooner than you expect it to resurface is a telltale sign for that. Are there other kind of examples of that? Is there ever kind of like a resident that's like, no, but my brother-in-law is a plumber and he said that this, and you got to get involved in stuff like that? Is there any other examples?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay.
I mean, the one thing I will say is we always encourage our residents to, if you've got a maintenance problem, pick up the phone and call us.
Yeah.
We've got a team of trusted vendors that we're going to send out that are going to likely resolve the issue for you. We don't want anybody to get in there that doesn't necessarily know what they're doing and makes the problem worse.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. So that's the adult in the room. The adult in the room is kind of similar to one of the things that we described before. Problem keeps problem keeps resurfacing and the solution that you've thought you could do by just a maintenance request is clearly not working. Somebody can out there evaluate, ask a couple of experts, has a network of folks that she or he have been working with for a long time and values those opinions because of a track record.
Yeah, and that's something where we're also meeting the vendor on site. We're not just sending, when we're getting involved as a construction team, we're not just blanket sending a vendor out and going, go take a look at it, right? We're meeting the vendor on site. We're there live on scene, seeing what's going on, talking through the problem with them, getting that firsthand knowledge and that firsthand experience with them. So that way, when we go back to our owner and says, okay, I need you to give me approval for X amount of dollars, then I can say, this is why. I've been there. I've seen it with my own eyes. This is what we need to do that's going to get this resolved.
Got it. So then if I'm the owner, then my question is, this seems like it's been getting out of hand because this keeps happening. You're giving me this recommendation. Have you been out there with your vendor and actually like taking a look at this? So I know that we're not just going in circles here. And I know that you have like a before and after of thinking about it.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. That's a good one to add in there. Michael Santoria says, had this exact same plumbing issue with one of my rentals, had multiple plumbing visits over the years. After the tenant moved out, JWB had the plumbing scoped, found they were at the end of its expected life, roots and collapsing, and work was done and the property was back on the market. There you go. That sound familiar?
I may have had a hand in that.
You may have touched that one. Okay. And then there is the bigger issue arises, right? Like this is something that goes, I guess, tell me a little bit more about what you meant by that.
I think it goes back to, again, we try to send somebody out there to fix the issue. It keeps coming back around.
Yeah.
You know, maybe, for instance, maybe we've got an older home, it's off-grade flooring.
Yeah.
You know, I see a crack in a tile or a crack in a piece of plank. And the initial thought would be, oh, maybe that piece of plank's old, maybe that piece of tile's old, it's just cracked. You know, it happens in old houses, but you may find there's a larger underlying issue there. I've got a subfloor issue. I've got a water intrusion issue. So again, all kinds of things that could cause that. And sometimes it is just as simple as, hey, tile's old, cracked. Here's what it is, you know? So
I assume there's also the random black swan event stuff, right? Like I remember Greg telling us one time somebody drove into a house.
Oh yeah. We've had a couple of those, you know, tree falls on the house, car driving into the house. Those are always exciting. We actually had one probably about, I don't know, maybe like a year and a half, 2 years ago, where somebody had a Ring camera on the corner of the house and you just like watched it in slow motion. It's like a horror movie in slow motion. You see the car hydroplaning and just bam, right into the side of the house.
Oh, geez.
That was an interesting one. So yeah, you'd be surprised. We definitely get some that are a little out there, if you will.
Talk me through those moments and just kind of like what that process becomes. It has to be a super scary moment for the resident. It's got to be a super scary moment for the homeowner. Tell me a little bit about how that process unfolds.
Yeah, I mean, definitely for the resident. I mean, you're in a situation where it's like, oh my gosh, what happened? Who's going to come and fix this for me?
Yeah.
Right. There's a little bit of unknown. There's a little bit of uncertainty there. I think for us as a company, from a property management company, from a real estate capital company, as a construction company, the most important thing that we can do is communicate to all parties involved. Yeah. Communication's key. And again, I think that a situation like that, that's where that active project management is really going to come in and save the day. We're going to come in, we're going to get it fixed, right? We're going to get it fixed quick, and we're going to move on with life.
Yeah. So it's the difference. I would think about it from the owner perspective and from the resident perspective. If this is a property manager or like a self-managed thing where you're just kind of like trying to keep up with what's going on and communicating retroactively or defensively, it's not going to be a good experience for everybody. Whereas a proactive communication, having project management on, knowing timelines, knowing expectations, knowing, hey, this person's supposed to show up at this day at this time, and knowing that they're gonna, and if not, that I'm gonna get a call ahead of time.
There's value to knowing exactly what needs to be done and knowing exactly what vendor is going to be best suited for that.
Yeah. And then I would also assume value in knowing ahead of time what the schedule disruption is and all those kind of like communication patterns go as well.
Absolutely.
Right. So it makes a big difference, again, in the experience and also in the timeline. Somebody that's really managing that timeline is going to compress it as opposed to,
Yep.
oh, Peter, the plumber didn't show up today. Okay, well, let's see him next Thursday. Right. Like, yeah.
Exactly.
So I could see how both of those. All right. Couple more questions here. All right. Murph Hayes is asking, how often do you recommend an inspection of a property between lease renewals or turnover?
I don't know if I necessarily have a recommendation there. I mean, it's something that we offer,
Mhm.
right? And I think that ultimately that, I don't know if there's necessarily a hard, fast rule that says this is how often you should do it.
Mhm.
I think that that really comes down to a comfort level that you have with JWB
Yeah.
and the relationship that you have with your portfolio manager. And that's something that I would generally defer to the portfolio manager to guide you on.
Yeah. And Murph, we've talked about this a lot on the past, and it's this idea that JWB has this data flywheel that they make all their decisions on. And at one point, the data flywheel was telling them, I think the owners went to a conference, they heard from someone that scheduled, annual or whatever inspections didn't actually drive results. So they tested it. They took a small segment of their housing stock and did a test on whether regular inspections work or not. And they found that there was no difference in the ROI, because if you think about human nature, if I have a regular scheduled inspection of something and I'm a resident that's trying to hide something, I'm going to hide it from you.
Right.
What JWB's done is two things. One is they've displaced the resources that they would do for that in order to maximize the resources during the turn and during the construction side of it, and all these different things in order to make that go faster. And also, because they have 5,500 homes that are all concentrated in one singular area, they have a network of people that are always around all these different homes, and your partners are trained to have something that they look at.
I would say that was one thing I was going to mention is like, look, if I have a work order that's getting opened and I'm sending a vendor out, and that really goes back to, again, what we talk about with the relationships that we've built with our vendors, right? Trusted partners.
Yeah.
They know that if they see something that doesn't look right and that we probably want to know about, they're reporting that back. So we're getting a little bit of intel there. We got a little bit of a mole, if you will. Yeah.
Did you watch Game of Thrones?
No, I've never watched. Game of
There's
Thrones.
a character of Varys who has he calls it his little birds. Right, because he's got, and it ends up, spoiler alert, it ends up being children that he knows all around the kingdom that tell him all the secrets of everybody.
Right.
And to me, it's like your service partners are your little birds, right? Like whether they're in a property and they see something funny, or they're next to a property, because chances are the neighbor probably is a JWB house, and sees something, they'll tell you. So it just becomes a much more effective way of doing it than announcing it ahead of time. All right, Billy Green asks, he's a mountain man. Asks, as a new JWB client, it never occurred to me to ask if there are any restrictions on tenants per smoking cigarettes. Is this a big maintenance concern when rolling over a property to a new tenant? You ever have issues with that stuff?
Not as much as you would think. And it's something that we could obviously get fixed. Okay. If we have to go in and prime the walls, if there's nicotine on the walls, if we have to go in and do an ozone treatment to get rid of the smell. I'm not 110% familiar with the lease structure and things of that nature. That's more of a property management question, but I'd have to believe that there's probably something thrown in there about that,
But as a construction guy, it doesn't scare you to have to get rid of the smell of smoke. There is things that
If I have to steam clean the carpet, I'll steam clean the carpet. If I have to remove the carpet, we can remove the carpet. Obviously, we don't want to if we don't have to.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of different angles you could attack that from.
All solvable. Got it. Cool. All right. Carolyn Godwin. Carolyn, new name. Happy to have you. Thanks for asking a question. Asks, triage. A car plows into a house. Urgent intervention required. Assuming all contractors are deployed, do you pull contractors and divert them to the urgent need?
Absolutely. The easy answer is yes. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't get more straightforward than that. The answer is yes.
This is why you have somebody on top of this that specializes in the service.
Yes.
For sure. Right. And a network of little birds that you
there you go.
Flock over there. All right, cool. Leslie Wilson, the Maven from the mountains of Colorado, says, can you explain the ozone treatment for getting rid of a smoke smell?
Yeah, we have a company that does, mold remediation and things of that nature for us. And I don't know all the specifics of exactly how the machine works, if you will, but basically they call it an air scrubber, and they put this machine in and it filters the air through. And for lack of a better term, it cleans the air. That'd be the best way I could put it. It cleans the air and it gets rid of the smell.
There you go. But it's generally a mold remediation company that's doing it.
Yep.
And it's an ozone treatment.
Yep.
It's kind of the nomenclature.
Yeah.
All right. Michael Santorios has a question. With today's higher construction costs and higher labor costs, do you find that it's more cost efficient to put up a new home versus a full renovation? Is that within your purview?
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be more expensive to build a new, obviously. Now, the trade-off to that is you would think with a new construction property, you're going to have reduced maintenance costs. Now, your returns probably aren't going to be as great because you have a higher, entry point, price point.
Yeah, but your price to cash flow ratio.
Exactly.
Yeah. But returns are still in line, right?
Exactly.
Because you only do one type of return here. All right, cool. Michael Santoris also asks, has JWB ever considered tracking the life of the major appliances in order to identify their end of life before they fail?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, from a renovation standpoint, if we're going in and we're purchasing a property to renovate that we're going to sell to one of our investors, absolutely. We're going to call the roofers out. We're likely going to replace the roof unless they're able to provide us with what we call a life letter to say, hey, I've got X amount of years that I believe is left on the roof. We're generally going to replace all the big appliances, HVAC, stuff like that. From a turn standpoint, yes, it is definitely something that we're looking at. And again, going back to the relationship that we have with our vendors, if I call the HVAC guys out to do a pull and clean, on the coils and do an inspection of the HVAC system, they're going to tell me and they're going to say, hey, look, this system is likely at the end of the road here. Is it functioning? Yes. Is it going to make it through the next 3 or 4 year lease? Maybe not. They're going to provide me a quote to say, hey, let's go ahead and replace this. And then we present both options to the owner. Generally speaking, for me personally, I'm going to tend to say, hey, look, if it's working, it's working, right? I don't want to spend any money unnecessarily. If it ends up breaking, it ends up breaking down. We can always go back into the back end, and that's a quick, easy type of deal to get done. But yeah, absolutely. Our superintendents are looking at it. Our vendors are looking at it, and they're giving us a recommendation where they feel fit.
There you go. Keep on adding to that data flywheel, man. Billy Green has a question. William, with Pablo's new stash, does he remind you of Clark Gable?
I mean, a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Deal. I'll take a little bit of Clark.
Look, next week's Halloween, man. Is that it? Is what it? You dress up like Clark Gable for Halloween?
Is it Clark Gable? Should I do?
Show?
I was thinking the Adams guy. The Adams.
Ooh, that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, it could be that guy.
Right. That means Cohen's gonna be cousin it.
I was gonna say it could be Wednesday, but yeah, okay. I love that. All right. Ken Moline asks, we had a sagging sewer drain that had repetitive clean out calls. This seemed to me to be a construction defect. How do you differentiate between construction defect and natural wear and tear, and who pays who to get it fixed?
That's a good question. And I think that the first question in my mind is coming back to, is it a new construction property? Right, where we built it from the ground up and we put all the infrastructure in, and there's new sewer lines being run from the property to the tap when the home's being built? Or is it an older property where, it might have galvanized piping or an Orangeburg pipe, something that's, not PVC? When we go in to do a renovation, we may not be replacing, 80 feet of sewer line going to the tap if there's nothing wrong with it, right? So I think that ultimately comes down to whether or not we put it in when it was renovated or built, or if it was there and it's existing and it's been there for 80 years and there's been no problems with it at all. And eventually old things break.
Okay, there you go. It was he's saying it was a 5-year-old home. So, okay. Any more, if it's a 5-year-old home, any more input there?
Send me the address.
Yeah, that's a good chat with JWB.com,
yeah,
right? Or reach out to your property manager, right?
Yeah.
And you can find out about it. Okay. So William, by the way, thank you. Great run of questions there, man. Good stuff with that. This is why the community is so valuable. There is another thing that you do, right? Like you handle the renovation portion as well. And you were talking to me in our onboarding call about something I found very interesting. And it's this idea that you're acutely aware of, when it comes to giving advice to our community of people that do it themselves or invest elsewhere, that there is a minimum kind of like livability standard that all renovations should be put up to. And then there's the JWB way. So I would love for you to first tell me, what is the minimum kind of like renovation standard for that everybody should expect at the very least? So first off, if anybody wants to know what our livability standards are, and when I talk about livability standards, I'm really more referring to
what's the minimum level of standard that this property needs to be at for us to provide you property management services?
Got it.
Right. And that's actually available on our website.
Oh,
So if
interesting.
anybody wants to go take a look at it on the website, it is available on the website. Right. But there is a differentiating factor between what we would do to a property and maybe what you would do to your property. And like, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. There's not necessarily a right or wrong way. We believe in our way, but we know that that's not the right fit for everybody. So when I look at a JWB standard, again, that goes back to what we were just talking about a second ago. If we're buying a property that we're going to renovate and sell to you, we're going to take care of all those major things up front while we're renovating the property. We want to sell you a property that is hopefully as maintenance free as possible, right? But if we're bringing on properties to our property management business that are properties that we didn't necessarily renovate, you know, the first time that we go in there and do a property turn or whatever it may be, the first time the construction team is going to, you know, get their hands on
Gets
it.
at it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We kind of like to offer you a buffet of options, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
To where, you know, again, we're going in and we're identifying everything, but we're also saying, hey, okay, these are the things that definitively have to be done to get us to that minimum standard. And then here's all the other things that we would do to the property. We think that it's in the best interest of the home from a long-term maintenance standpoint. We think it's in the best interest of the home from a rentability and a marketability standpoint. But, you know, you don't have to do that. But really the whole idea of this livability standard, we're really just taking it straight from the city code, right?
Okay.
You know, can't have holes in the wall. You know, we got to be able to heat and cool the house. You got to have functioning plumbing. The roof can't leak. So kind of these basic fundamentals, for lack of a better term.
House has to function.
House has to function, man. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the livability standard. You have to provide shelter and things have to work.
Right.
So then talk to me about the delta between the livability standard and the JWB standard.
Well, it's a good question because there's some things that are definitively going to be a livability standard. There's some things that are definitively going to be a JWB standard. And there's some things that kind of fall in the middle that, depending on the situation, could kind of float either way. So like, let's take flooring, for example. Okay. You know, you have an option between putting in carpet and putting in a hard surface plank flooring. Okay. Well, if I'm going in and, you know, the flooring's just ripped up, it's torn up, it clearly needs to be replaced. Okay. Clearly needs to be replaced. That's a livability standard. I can't move somebody into a house where it's not clean, it's unsanitary, it's a defective product, for lack of a better term. Okay. So now I've defined that the flooring is a livability standard that I need to take care of while we are in here working. Okay. Where you get into the realm of like a livability versus a JWB standard is maybe if it's JWB and we're renovating the property that we're going to sell to you, we're going to put hard surface flooring in because we want to try to sell you a product that's going to be as maintenance free as possible. But a hard surface flooring is a lot more expensive than carpet is, right? So maybe it's in your best interest as the investor where you're putting the money into the property, not JWB putting the money into the property to go, hey, maybe I'm going to put carpet in here. It's, you know, a third of the price, right? I'm still going to get my new flooring. I'm going to meet that minimum livability standard, but I did it in a way that's a much more cost-effective route than the plank flooring.
Got it. More cost-effective initial cost. Route, right? Yeah. Because we've talked about this in the past, in the property management, and even in the course, right? So if have you heard about the course that we have?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. If you
Absolutely.
go to nyaiclass.com, you get this 2-hour course where you learn all the basics of rental property investing and how to succeed and how to scale your portfolio. But I remember when we put that course together, it kind of came down to 3 things. It came down to durability, ease of maintenance, and replaceability that you're looking at, which lead to, again, durability. You have a family living in a house, they're going to use it, they're going to beat it up, right? So you want stuff that's going to last for a while. Ease of maintenance, again, you want them taking care of it. You got to make it easy for them in order to do that. When you're going to send people in, you want it to be easier so it reduces cost long terms. And then ease of replacement is kind of something you mentioned before. If you have carpet in the entire house and somebody messes up the carpet, you got to replace the whole carpet. Whereas if you have this like plank flooring and there's one section that's damaged, you can just replace a couple of those sections, get it back in, reduces cost long terms. Do you have, out of those kind of like 3 things, do you have, let's say I'm somebody I have a property management company in Denver, they're about to kind of like bring my house up to standard and I want them to be the JWB standard. Can you kind of like rattle off the things that you would, if this was your home, would be like, all right, tell your guy, these are the things that I want that people don't generally do that we do.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously hard surface flooring is going to be a big one. Let's say like there's very clearly an issue where I've got like a roof leak, right? And I've got a repair versus a replacement option. And the roofer's saying, hey, like this roof's pretty much shot. We can do this Band-Aid fix. The JWB standard is going to be, we're going to put a new roof on it. We're going to spend the money up front. Again, and that also goes back to, again, create a good resident experience, replacing the major components, the MEPs. Yeah, some of those big ticket items, for lack of a better term, to where I know that once I get somebody in there, I should realistically just be able to let it ride, you know.
At what point is it replace the MEPs? Like what's your go, no go of like, how long has this MEP component been around before we recommend changing it out when you're about to renovate?
I mean, you would think anywhere between 8 to 10 years on an AC system. It's probably about time, but you have some that last 15, 16, 17 years. So it's like, I try to stay away from necessarily saying, you know, again, if JWB is doing it, we are definitively going to replace it because we are selling you that product to be maintenance free. But if I'm an owner, okay, I'm looking at it, it's like, hey, I don't know, like this may die tomorrow, or I may get another 5 years out of it. So it's like, I'm not going to spend the money unnecessarily up front, but maybe I'm prepared to if I need to.
Got it. So maybe set aside a little bit of extra budget when you're acquiring the house and things of this sort. Okay.
Exactly. In my opinion, the worst thing that we could do is spend money unnecessarily, right? I would much rather maybe take a look at rolling the dice on something. And in the best case scenario, the house gets rented and we don't have any long-term maintenance issue there with like an AC system. And we get a full another lease cycle out of it. We get another 4.5 year stay out of it where we haven't, you know, laid out that capital, the property's cash flowing, right? And you know what, in the worst case scenario, somebody moves in and you know, we got a problem. We got to go in and replace the AC. And guess what? We're going to get it done within a day. Right. And we haven't spent that money unnecessarily at that point.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, cool. Good explanation. Anything as far as that side of it, the renovations part of it, this applies to, of course, if you're a turnkey property owner, you guys, that comes with the service. Property management people, it comes with the service?
Yeah, I mean, from a property management standpoint, again, we know there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. So we're going to kind of give you those options. And it's our job to be a good steward of your money, obviously, and be a good steward of your property. So if I see something, I'm going to put it in there and I'm going to say, hey, we see this. This is something you should think about. Whether or not you want to do it is totally up to you.
Awesome, man. All right. So again, if you are looking to purchase a rental property and invest in rental properties, and you want a team that has an in-house construction department like a William, or you want to have your house that you already own property managed by somebody that has William on staff, then you go to chatwithjwb.com. You can set up a call and we can make that all happen. Highly recommend. Good guy to work with over here. We got a couple of questions before we wrap up here. JC asked the question, do you ever have issues with a sewer pipe when you hydrojet it? Have you ever messed around with that?
Absolutely.
What, you have issues with it?
No, I mean, that's something that we're typically going to defer to before I go in and start ripping out sewer pipe and redraining the house. You know, likely we're going to try to hydrojet it and see if that resolves the issue.
What is, I'm like ignorant to all this.
Yeah,
right?
basically
like, why would you hydrojet something?
You're going in and let's say I've got a cast iron drain and it's old and it's starting to maybe flake and get some ridges on it and stuff. And if I'm flushing toilet paper, you know, it may get drug or caught by something that's hanging down there, and you go in there with the hydrojet and you're basically blasting off all the old stuff and try to make the pipe as clean as possible to allow everything to pass through.
Got it. Okay. Hydrojet sounds fun.
Very scientific.
Billy Green asks, radon seems to be a big issue of concern with buyers here in Denver area and is overblown in his opinion. However, is radon something that you are required to test for down there in Florida?
To be honest with you, I don't know off the top of my head. That would be a question for Jim Marshall,
Jen,
our director of
past star of the show
operations for
also.
for the construction group.
I remember radon when I was building homes in California. We had to do radon stuff. I don't remember doing it in Florida either, but I was in South Florida.
If it is something, it's likely going to be something that's more going to be tied to new construction, where you're having to do this, that, and everything to get a certificate of occupancy, not something that's going to play into renovating a property.
Got it. Makes sense. Good answer. JC asks, can hydrojetting destroy the pipes so we end up with a bigger problem? Has that ever happened?
I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, you're always taking somewhat of a gamble depending on how fragile the pipe is, what it's made of. So it's possible.
If hydrojetting destroys the pipes, is that like a sign that you probably were needing to upgrade pipes anyways?
Right.
So it just forces the issue.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go.
Exactly.
BJ McKay asks, who maintains air filters on the HVAC systems, renters or management company?
So it is definitely a responsibility of the resident to change the air filter. Now, we do have a resident benefits package.
Second nature.
Right, where we are sending filters to the home for the residents to use. So we're providing the filter for them, but it is their responsibility to change it.
Yep, there you go. BJ, if you want to know about that process, we've had Andrew Smallwood on the podcast, who's out there with Second Nature, who does this residence benefits package. He talks about how they built a company based on solving that problem and then expanded it into all these other resident benefit things. It's a really, really interesting story. Michael Santorios asks lots of plumbing questions. Does JWB camera plumbing during a reno or new construction, or would that be up to the purchaser to do?
No, we're renovating a property that we're going to sell to one of our turnkey owners. We're absolutely going to camera the lines.
Absolutely. Camera getting in there. Okay. William, as we land this plane, I want to talk to you about something that I don't often like to talk to people about, which is their Alabama fandom. You got a Nick Saban philosophy that you kind of live by. You want to tell me about it?
Yeah, well, so I mean, like the guys are going to kill me for this. I mean, everybody around here is a Gator. I'm kind of the loner, but
True.
Whether or not you like Nick Saban, I mean, when you think about like what has made Nick Saban successful at every stop that he's been at, Alabama, LSU, Michigan State, the NFL, whatever it is, right? And it's this mindset that he has. And it's the mindset that we've asked our guys to buy into that's created success for us. And that mindset is, I don't want you to focus on the external factors. I don't want you to focus on what the end result is, because all that's going to do is create anxiety for yourself, right? The better approach is to focus on what's the immediate task at hand. What's the right decision that I need to make for this property right here and now, right? Whether it's a renovation, a property turn, a construction services ticket, and, putting it in football terms, right? He says, play every play like it has a life of its own and win every play. And if you play every play like it has a life of its own, 9 times out of 10, you're going to look up at the scoreboard and you're probably going to win. Right. And so that's the mindset that we've asked our guys to have, is to focus on the immediate task at hand. Also a big thing, removing the emotion out of the decision, making a subjective decision as to what is in the best interest of this owner, resident, property, all the above, taking the emotion out of it. And that stuff all sounds cool, right? And it makes sense, right? And it sounds cool, but at the end of the day, you have to have the right team in place to execute that, to execute that mindset. And we have that team in place. They do a fantastic job. I mean, there's really no other way around it. They do a great job. James, our property turn supervisor, Sam, Matt, Tim, Taylor, Tom, who does our turnkey renovations and our client renovations, Nate and Hector, who handle our construction services tickets. They've all bought into this mindset, right? And it's really become a snowball effect, for lack of a better term, where as everybody has bought into that mindset and had that cohesion and that continuity of the team, that snowball starts to roll downhill and it gains momentum and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And, if you look at what we did with property turns specifically, you look 3 or 4 years ago and really at the history of JWB, it was taking us 17, 18 days to complete a property turn, right? We've asked everybody to lean into this and buy into this, and what we've been able to accomplish speaks for itself. I mean, I know Allie talked about it the other day, we're down to 10 or 11 days on property turns. Q3, we finished 320 property turns in an average of 9.5 days. So, I mean, that's a full week that we've now got that property back on the market, getting it shown, getting it rented, getting it back cash flowing. I mean, those are real dollars that are affecting the return of the investment. So it's all just about a mindset and a shift in mindset to say, I don't want to focus on what the end result is. What is it that I need to do right here and now?
Yeah.
What's the best decision that I can make? And that's what's going to come from it.
And as somebody that is riddled with ADD and like, therefore anxiety all the time, that mindset, I remember watching this movie, I think it was called A Most Violent Year. And it's not like a super violent movie. It's just this guy that
Sounds
has
a little ominous.
but it's just this guy that buys this business and all this stuff starts going wrong and all these different things happen, but he just kind of like fights through it. And at the end of the day succeeds. And the moral of the story of the movie was just, there's always the next right move is kind of what he talks about. Right. And it reminds me of that, man. I remember seeing that movie and being like, yes, that is, if you can break things down to just like, yes, there's moments to think big and plan and do all these things. And Lord knows JWB does that. Right.
Yeah.
but on a day-to-day level, to just be thinking about what is the next thing that I need to do. That's the best thing that I can do to move this thing forward. No surprise that Nick Saban has the success he has, and you guys have the success that you guys have, right? Because it is a really, really awesome team, man.
Yeah,
Very
absolutely.
cool. This was awesome, man. Can I get a high five?
Yeah.
You crushed it, bud.
Appreciate
What'd you
that.
think of being on the Not Your Average Invest show today?
I guess I'm gonna find out if I get a gold star on the Cohen Walk of Fame. So time will tell, right?
Time will tell. Well, you know, man, it's amazing that we get like 60 people that show up and like spend an hour of their day in the middle of a Tuesday to listen to us speak. And I just think it's a testament. By the way, construction hands, man, that was a strong high five. You had it, but that is just a testament to the value that you're putting out there, right? Like seeing that ticker go up as the show went on. Yeah. Testament to you, questions put in, testament to you, and like the knowledge that you're putting out there. So really, really great job. Really appreciate the community showing up, and want to see you guys on Thursday. I'll be back in here. Greg is still doing business planning Thursday, but we'll have a guest investor and it'll be awesome. And from now till then, don't be average. See you on Thursday. Thanks, man.